19th century philosophy is looking through that transcendental self, the self-consciousness, so unified, in order to see reality made in the image of the self. And the image of the self means reality is of the nature of mind or spirit, and so you get 19th century ideals. And then other things emphasizing concrete human experience, organized, unified in various ways. You can see how it's organized for Whitehead by God's superjective nature, coupled with the decision of the new elect, which brings things into unity. And you can see how it's organized for Dewey by virtue of the problem situation which is experienced, which brings everything into unity ready for a problem-solving decision. But when you come to Sartre, it's a different story. And if you like, you find in Sartre the culmination of a process that Charles Taylor in his recent book on the self calls the loss of the self. Because the thesis of the transcendence of the ego is that there simply is no transcendental self. There's no unifying core to the self that has any enduring identity. I create myself with every act of thought, with every experience, with every sense perception. I create myself. Now, you say that sounds like a wild idea. Well, maybe it seems so to us. But keep in mind that Sartre is doing phenomenology. And if you like, that's the third reason why I selected this book. That it gives an example of phenomenological description at work. And as you've probably noted, Sartre explicitly interacts with what Husserl has done with regards to the self. Husserl emphasized the intentionality of consciousness. Remember, that was the main theme that came out of his phenomenological work. Intentionality. He tried to bracket consideration of particular objects or particular beliefs and theories so as to examine the universal structures of consciousness so that they could become the objects of what he called eidetic intuition. Kant speaks of them, using another of Husserl's phrases, as phenomenal objects. A phenomenal object is obviously the object that appears. It's an object of thought, not necessarily an independent entity, but what directly appears to the consciousness. So when Husserl brackets out all of the particulars and tries to concentrate on the universal structures of consciousness of being in the world, that hyphen relationship between subject and object, then that hyphen relationship becomes the phenomenal object. Those structures, those idea, using Plato's term, those universals, become the phenomenal object. Now, intentionality then is involved with reference to external objects in all of our consciousness. But if the external objects are bracketed, what they are in particular is excluded in phenomenological reduction, then the intentionality is directed instead to the phenomenal objects, which Husserl attempts to describe, and of course his description is of the act of intentionality. That's the universal that appears most prominently. Now, Sartre is doing phenomenology. He's an existential phenomenologist. So you can anticipate that he's not interested in, not going to be interested in some transcendental self in order to provide a new foundationalism to rescue science from its relativizing tendencies. Remember his concern about the foundations of science. Nor is he going to be like Heidegger, doing a phenomenology of human existence, Dasein, as a key to perceiving Sein, being itself. He's going to do simply a phenomenology of human existence for its own sake, in order to gain this clearer perception of these universal characteristics of human existence, of being in, a hyphen. But rejecting any transcendental ego, all that remains for him to concentrate on is intentionality as such. You'll find that he says that consciousness is nothing but intentionality. Nothing but, if you like, a consciousness meaning or pointing to objects. You see? Consciousness meaning, pointing to, intentional reference to objects. So that you can see why Husserl is often said to tell us that intentionality is a meaning-giving act. A meaning-giving act. Not primarily in the sense that we talk about the meaning of life, or the meaning of some political event, but in the sense of attending to, focusing on that object, making it present to us. So the thing becomes a phenomenal object, having meaning for me. Kant's ting for a mick. I pull it into phenomenal status by the intentional act. And in meaning it, it has meaning for me. Now, this means that the self itself is nothing but the act of consciousness. And he develops that in another place in a little work of his, The Emotions, where he rejects behavioristic psychology outright, by which account the self would simply be a product of environmental causes. Now, he's not going to say that. Nobody after the Kantian Copernican revolution who agrees with the Copernican revolution would say that. Behaviorists are pre-Kantian Enlightenment types, as if the self is the passive recipient of these behavioral cause-effect mechanisms. You see. No, rather he's inclined towards a depth psychology. Intentionality is the characteristic of human being, the act of being in the world towards the world, and emotion simply reveals that. Emotions have intentionality. Emotions are directed towards. You're angry with, hopeful about. You love somebody. You feel sorry for them. Emotion reveals our being in the world, our facticity. It's for that reason that you couldn't even in your wildest dream imagine Sartre debating with Descartes whether an external world exists. You see? It's as if he says, I vomit, therefore it exists. But just the experience of being nauseated by something means that the external reality is given in the feeling of nausea. You see? If you've ever been seasick, you know what I mean. There's never any question about the reality of the external world, or the internal world, for that matter. So, by virtue of the intentionality of emotion, our being is being for something, being in relationship to world. The basic term is not I, but I it. Not subject, but subject hyphen object. That's the basic given, together. Descartes' stove-heated room being an illusory affair. So then, that's the theme and the way in which it relates to Husserl. You'll see it again. Let me pick this up now. You'll see it again. If ever you've read his little essay, What is Existentialism? That sometimes is published simply under the title Existentialism. It was a one-lecture thing. It's there that he defines existentialism as saying existence precedes essence. Existence precedes essence. And he's talking particularly about the self. My existence precedes any essence. You see? My existence precedes any essence. I have to create my own nature, my own self. There is no transcendental ego. It's in that essay that he cites Dostoevsky, if God is dead, then anything is possible. But he enlarges it from if God is dead, then anything is possible, to saying if there are no universals, then anything is possible. If there is no transcendental self, then anything is possible. Because there are no fixed points of reference, no fixed entities, no fixed universal structures of the self. It's just intentionality. So anything could be possible. We have to create our meanings, our values, our world. Well, let's see. That is developed much more systematically, maybe I should leave that up, developed much more systematically in his major work, Being and Nothingness. Oh, I wish I could have asked you to read that. Trouble is it has about 500 pages. Small print. But there you get the whole works. This is his philosophical magnum opus. It's the system, if you like. And it's there that he develops explicitly the dialectic for which he's well known, that seems to echo the master-servant relationship of Hegel. The l'en-soi pour soi dialectic. Now, the term's very simple. Pour soi is for the self, and l'en-soi is what is already in itself. And you can readily see that if intentionality makes an object into a phenomenal object, an object for me, that he's going to be saying that any person in the world, in meaning, getting involved in, relating to any other person or object, is seeking to make that person part of what is for me, trying to make that into a phenomenal object. His well-known play, No Exit. I think I asked you before how many have read No Exit. I got a dismal response. These illiterate Philistines. Well, you see, in that room from which these three people cannot get themselves to escape, you see, one starts trying to relate to another, but in that for me fashion. It's not a dialogical I-thou relationship respecting the two persons. No. But it's in a manipulating or dominating sense. That's why in Being and Nothingness, when he talks about sexuality, it's always masochism or sadism. You see. The for me is the thing. And the same is true in his play The Flies, which is a version of the old Greek drama about Orestes, the prince who comes back to the palace where he had been raised as a boy, and so on and so forth. And now his mother has married somebody else after killing his father. And he, of course, was secreted away by a servant in order to save his life. And now he's a grown young man and comes back. And he recognizes that little door in the palace wall. And as he directs his attention to it, intentionality, he says, that's my door. I used to go in and out of. But immediately in that intentional act of referring to that door, it gains meaning for him. It becomes his. And the door into the palace becomes his. And the palace becomes his. And the throne should be his. You see? The intentionality. And so he kills his mother. And then the flies, the fates, haunt him, drive him. But the for me, the in itself then, if the for me is the phenomenal object, The in itself is, of course, the noumenal object, the thing which simply is in itself. Now, the dialectic becomes obvious when what already is in itself, regardless of me, doesn't respond to my intentionalities. You see? So that you get a dialectic that is not simply a dialectic of possessing, but also of rejecting, repudiating. Now, that l'en soit pour soi dialectic, he spells out in relationship to endless things, in being and nothingness. And one of the things that he applies it to is, of course, understanding knowledge. Now, we were watching this in Nietzsche, in Heidegger, in terms of the postmodern tendency. And in such, likewise, knowing, he says, is a mode of our being in the world. Now, that's obviously the starting point, because knowledge is a mode of intentionality. Intentionality is our being in the world. In knowing something, it's an intentional act. It's referring to. Now, his point is that and notice the vocabulary, because you get the same vocabulary in Transcendence of the Ego. The for itself, yes, that's this contentless self, no essence to the self. The for itself has being by not being the in itself. Yeah. How does the servant have identity as a servant, has being as a servant? By not being a master. How does the master have identity as a master? By not being a servant. The for itself has being by not being something other, the in itself. So that by being conscious of something other than myself, I now see myself. I realize my own being as not that other. Now, when you see the master-servant relationship and bring that to that language, it seems to be perfectly simple and obvious. I find my own being in not being the other. Now, he goes on to say that this removes the illusion of having objective intellectual knowledge of things exactly as they are. The illusion of enlightenment knowledge is removed. Because what I know is always identified as what it is not. If I'm talking about the in itself, what I know is that it's not the for myself, it's the other. So what I know then is nothing but what I intend, what I mean. Nothing but what it is for me. So there is my being, which is other than that, and the nothingness of what is in itself. And so what's the title of the book? Being, pour soi, finding my being in relationship to others, being and nothingness, l'en soi, the in itself, which is nothing but what it is for me. Being and nothingness. So in trying to determine, in Enlightenment style, what this is, in trying to determine its essence, all that I'm actually doing is determining what it is for me and nothing else. So knowledge is not representational. Exit Descartes through Kant's first critique. Knowledge is not representational. That's an invention of philosophers, he says. Knowledge is simply being present for me, because intentionality makes something present to me. Knowledge is intentionality. So knowledge is the act of making something present for me. Well, you can see then what that does to traditional Enlightenment epistemology. Do you get the l'en soi pour soi thing? In itself, for itself? That's really the philosophical thesis that runs all the way through his writings. If you get a hold of that, then he's very easy reading. Relatively speaking, it's not exactly comic strip stuff. Yeah. One can... now let me back up and see.